Hey class, welcome back. We're going to take a look at value today. This is going to be part one, what we demoed in class. So we're going to take a look, again, like I said, at value. And you're going to need a couple things before we get started. First, you're going to need a ruler. You may have like your standard ruler, like so. You may have a drafting ruler, kind of like mine. If you have neither, you're probably going to need to get yourself a straight edge. And we're also going to need to have our two pencils that you got from me, the HB and the 2H. So gather your supplies, and we'll get back and we'll get going here in a second. All right, hopefully you have your supplies here. We're going to start by making a 1 7-inch long line. So take your ruler, place it on the paper, and again, put your pencil alongside the ruler's edge, and let's get 7 inches long of a straight line. Okay, so everybody has their straight line. When I'm doing ruler work, I like to rotate my paper. And for this next step, let's rotate our paper. And we're going to measure at the end of each line here, or on this line, the end of each side here, we want to make it 1 inch wide. So at the end of the line, both sides, 1 inch. So we have 1 inch line, 7-inch line, 1 inch line. Now take your ruler and let's line it up at the ends of both of those 1 inch lines here, and drag our ruler and our pencil along our ruler until we have a long rectangular shape like so. And you can see I'm using the paper at the top of my sketchbook if you have a vertical sketchbook format. Next, I want to line up my ruler at the bottom of the shape here. Make sure my end of the ruler, or 0, is at this end, 7 is at this end. And I want to make what's known as a tick mark at every inch. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Don't need one at 7 because we already have the line there. So you'll see little tick marks like so. Now let's take our ruler and let's line up our ruler's edge on each of these tick marks. And let's make 1 inch by 1 inch boxes for each one of these tick marks. We'll have 7 in all. We're done. We'll have something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1 inch by 1 inch squares. Next, let's go to our left side, and I'd like you to write the word white. At the opposite end, which is our right side, I want you to write the word black. Now, these are going to represent our lightest light and our darkest dark. In the middle box, we're going to write the word gray. And I usually follow that by just adding some dots here to go along in the middle space. So white, gray, and black. Then I also like to have students number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. These are going to symbolize our different values. And for our purposes, we're going to try to create 7 different values. When we have a wide range of values, often 5 to 7 shades of gray, white, and black, we have what's known as a high contrast image. If we only have a couple grays, 2 or 3, we're not going to get a lot of contrast. So in order for us to get a high contrast, good gripping, eye-catching photo, we want to have our white, our black, sorry about that, and our middle grays. All right, so also we can put this word here, value scale, so you guys understand what this is, what we're creating. We're creating a value scale. Before we do that, let's go back and cover a couple things that we saw in our presentation in class. We're going to draw ourselves some visuals. So we're going to make two parallel lines with an open triangle at the end. And then we're going to do a little zigzag line with a little end here. And this image is going to represent our pencil. And you might ask, why am I doing this? I want you to visually remember that we want a sharp tip. Okay? We want a shade using a sharp tip. So we've said it, now we've visually recognized it. I'd also like you to make a 90-degree angle. So the 90-degree angle inside the center here, we're going to make that pencil again. And our pencil is going to be on a 45-degree angle. And this is just to represent our pencil positioning. Now, you might fall outside the 45-degree pencil positioning, and that means how I hold my pencil to the paper. What I want you to remember is I don't want you shading on the side of the pencil. You don't need to be straight up and down. We want to be on a little angle. And we want to remember that our pressure is dictated by how hard we push in the pencil, and often also how close we hold our fingers to the end of our pencil. So if I'm holding down here, I'm probably going to see a lot more pressure. If I pull back on my pencil, I'm going to have less pressure. So we might make a little symbol, a plus and a minus, to symbolize where we might hold our hands for pressures. Okay? So let's get to it. Using your HB pencil, let's start in our area known as our darkest dark, or our black. When we shade, we want to think first going vertically up and down. And we want to shade with the tip close together, right? We don't want to be wide apart like this. We want to try to shade as close to the previous line as possible as we go across the shape or the form. I'm holding it on a 45-degree angle. I'm getting a nice tip to wear down on the side, so I have some nice even shading. And as I get close to my edges here, I want to make sure I'm more controlled so I don't jump out of the lines. I want to refer you back to the image I showed of the fence and a dog. We use a fence, if we're a dog owner, to keep our dogs inside our yard and not let them get out. Same concept here with our pencil. We don't want to go over the edge in any direction. We want to keep our value inside the shape or the form. So I've went vertically back and forth. Now I like to spin my paper because my paper isn't cemented to the ground or stuck to the ground. I want to be in good, comfortable positioning. So now I can take my pencil and I can go back horizontally, even though to you it still looks vertical. But I went up and down. Now I'm going side to side. And I'm doing this with just enough pressure to not break the tip of my pencil. And again, you want to push hard here. This is going to be our darkest value here. And again, you want it to be even. And when we get into these next values, 6, 5, and 4, I'm going to show you the figure 8 technique that I learned from one of my college professors that helps make sure that your values are nice and even and not what's known as grainy. Okay, so there's our darkest dark, our lightest light. These are opposite ends of the spectrum. Next, we're going to again go to a vertical shading approach. Again, I'm going rapidly in the center, and as I come down to my edges, I'm making sure that I'm more controlled or neat as I work. Now, for our demo purposes, I'm holding back a little bit on my pencil just so you don't, I don't block out your view of what I'm doing. But remember, if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be holding down here more. It's more controlled, but less visible for you to see what I'm doing. So I've got my vertical shading in, rotating my paper. Now I'm going to go in the opposite direction and get my horizontal shading. Now here's when I'm going to introduce my figure eights. All of us are familiar with the figure eight. What we do is we do a rapid figure eight to kind of what I'll call wash out the grainy look and make it nice and even. You can do tiny little ones as you get to the corners or the edges, and then you can do bigger ones as you move around. And you don't have to have any rhyme or reason to where you're going, because eventually it just becomes an all nice even gray. So that's using or employing the figure eight technique. Now we're going to go to value number 5. Again, a shade or two lighter. What I'm doing is I'm putting less pressure on my pencil. I'm maybe doing a little less coverage, but I want to make sure that each of these value boxes are just a shade or two lighter than the previous one. Again, do the best you can to stay in the lines. Do the best you can to keep the value even. And again, just a shade or two lighter. Little figure eight action here. Now we've got our 3 values here: black, gray, a little bit lighter gray, and we're going to go to our middle of the road gray here. Now you can still use your HB pencil here. You don't have to change yet. Some people might want to jump into their 2H, but I would say for beginners purposes, just let's pull off some pressure and let's continue just to use this HB for now, because we'll use the 2H for box 3 and 2. Oh, almost forgot this little area here. Now I'm going to go back horizontally over, and again trying to get just a shade or two lighter than my previous box, addressing my edges, little figure eight in there in case I have any linear or grain look in there. And you can see now I've got a pretty nice set of values. I'm going to bracket right here, and I'm going to put HB just as a reference for us that we use the HB pencil to work mainly in those areas. Now I'm going to switch over now to my 2H, and you're going to notice a little difference here in your pencil application. It's going to be a harder pencil, so you're going to get tighter lines, and you can get a lot more grain to show up when you're using a 2H versus an HB. So it doesn't have that same softness as the 2B, or HB. So you might have to do just a little bit more work initially. Again, we'll control at the edges and the corners. We don't want to jump out. I'm going to go there. I'm going to rotate my paper. I'm going to now go over horizontally. Again, tighter, closer. Get a nice even gray here. And then I'm going to employ a little bit of those figure eights in there because, again, I like this technique. You don't have to use it, of course, but it's always an option. I like to have lots of different options in my artist tool bag in case they're needed. All right, so you see our 3 through 7, and now we're going to do our lightest gray. So here I want you to think about a feather just going over the top of the surface here. So I'm going to work pretty light here. I'm just going to brush the surface, picturing like the end of my pencil is like a feather. All right. Again, you can see a lot of grain here. that's okay. We're going to work at getting that out. And some of you may be like me. I have a tendency to have trouble focusing. I believe I have a little bit of ADD, but fortunately, art seems to kind of cure it or put it on hold for me a little bit, and art actually helps me focus. But some of you may have a hard time just sitting here going back and forth over your values. But again, this is a necessary technique, so do whatever you got to do to get yourself able to do this. And I know it can be frustrating. Sometimes shading is very meticulous and is hard to focus on, but if you can focus your attention, you're going to get some really nice shading and a nice range of values. Here I'm going to bracket again, and I'm going to use my 2H here as an indicator that I use the 2H pencil for those two. So that is our value scale, calling reference to our pencil tip, positioning of our pencil. We said a 45-degree angle is ideal, sharp tip is ideal. Holding your hands or fingers down towards the tip, we get an increase in pressure. As we draw back away from it, we get a decrease in our pressure. We talked about working horizontally in our shading, and then followed by covering that over with, vertically, and then horizontally, and then figure eight. So we have that vertical, the horizontal, and the figure eight. That's kind of our path to getting nice even values. Next, we're going to put what we call a gradual value scale, where we're going to be doing this exact look, but we're going to gradually do what's called a gradated value chart. All right, so that'll be in our next demo. So this concludes our value scale. Part 2, we're going to be addressing the gradated value chart or scale.